Trackhouse Racing has announced their first driver to the Project 91 car. Espn says they plan to talk to NASCAR about the next TV deal, and Jimmie Johnson has shown interest in potentially doing an Indy 500 Coca-Cola 600 double. What's going, guys? It's Daniel, and welcome back to our video. We've got a ton of NASCAR and other motorsports stories discussed here today on the channel. Let's go ahead and just jump straight into those really quickly. We're going to start off paint schemes and sponsorship news first. Let's jump into those really quickly. The first paint scheme we're taking a look at is Joe Graf Jr.'s 2022 Bucked Up Energy Patriotic scheme that we're going to see this weekend. I think the Bucked Up Energy schemes that Joe Graf Jr. has had have been really good. This one is no exception. I love the colors they have on it, and I think they really saw a job on this paint scheme. The next paint scheme we're taking a look at is Austin Center's 2022 Cardinals Cabin Tree Menard scheme that we'll see this weekend at Charlotte. This paint scheme is alright in my opinion. I think the red and yellow contrast very well. I think it's actually an alright looking paint scheme, and I hope that Austin can do well in this car this weekend. The next paint scheme we're taking a look at is Noah Gragson's 2022 Charlotte Knights scheme that we're going to see this weekend. I absolutely love this paint scheme. The Charlotte Knights colors look absolutely perfect. The black number works really well, and the colors match perfectly with the Charlotte Knights logo. I think it looks really awesome, and I'm excited to see on the racetrack this weekend at Charlotte. The next paint scheme we're taking a look at is Michael McDowell's 2022 Freight Auctions Patriotic scheme that we're going to see this weekend. This paint scheme is pretty cool in my opinion. I do love the patriotic colors, the camo colors that they have on the car. I think that's one thing that really makes the car look pretty solid, and honestly it's very similar to the other ones he's had, but I think it does look pretty awesome. The next paint scheme we're taking a look at is Ty Gibbs' 2022 Riser scheme that we're going to see this weekend at Charlotte. I do believe this is the first time the Risers is sponsoring Ty Gibbs this season, and very similar to his scheme last year, it does look really good in my opinion. I think Risers tends to have a lot of good schemes. This one's no exception. I absolutely love this paint scheme. Next paint scheme we're taking a look at is Carson Osbar's 2022 Premier Security Patriotic scheme that we're going to see tonight at Charlotte. This paint scheme's alright in my opinion. I don't think everything works perfectly on this car. I don't think the yellow number really matches perfectly with the white background and all that stuff. It's the only negative I have of this car, but honestly, it's not a bad car. The next paint scheme we're taking a look at is Austin Dillon's 2022 Critical Components scheme that we'll see tomorrow in the NASCAR Xfinity Series race. This paint scheme's, in my opinion, I don't think the colors really do a great job. It looks very similar to Brendan Poole's schemes he used to have when he was at Chip Ganassi Racing, which I wasn't a big fan of those schemes either. It's alright, but it's not great in my opinion. The next paint scheme we're taking a look at is Ryan Preece's 2022 RaceChoice.com scheme that we're going to see tonight in the Truck Series race at Charlotte. This paint scheme's alright in my opinion. I love the colors they have on it overall, and I do think that it does pretty good justice on the color scheme. The next paint scheme we're taking a look at is David Starr's 2022 Special Report EverFi scheme that we're going to see tomorrow in the NASCAR Xfinity Series race at Charlotte. This paint scheme's alright in my opinion. I think it's really cool they got Special Report sponsored once again. I believe this is the second or third race that they've sponsored David Starr this season, so I think it does look overall pretty good, and I'm looking forward to seeing on the racetrack here tomorrow night. The next paint scheme we're taking a look at is Matt Gutierrez's 2022 Tough Built Distributed Ledger scheme that we're going to see his NASCAR Truck Series debut tonight at Charlotte. This is a pretty cool paint scheme in my opinion. I think the colors actually do look really nice on it. It's really cool that Max Gutierrez is making his Truck Series debut this evening. The next paint scheme we're taking a look at is Sheldon Creed's 2022 Whelen Patriotic scheme that we're going to see this weekend at Charlotte. I think it actually looks pretty good in my opinion. I love the colors they have on it overall, and I think it's a very solid looking paint scheme for Sheldon Creed. Excited to see on the racetrack here tomorrow. The next paint scheme we're taking a look at is Eric Jones' 2022 Focus Factor Patriotic scheme that we're going to see this weekend. There's really not much to say about this paint scheme. The only thing that's different is a little bit of camo pattern on the cars. I think actually does look really nice on it overall. I'm excited to see on the racetrack, and hopefully Eric Jones can have a good run at Charlotte in this paint scheme this weekend. The next paint scheme we're taking a look at is Austin Dillon's 2022 Alsco Uniforms Patriotic scheme that we're going to see tomorrow in the NASCAR Xfinity Series race. There's not much to say on this paint scheme. It's basically the same Alsco uniform scheme, except there's a little bit of patriotic colors on it, which I do think look honestly pretty decent. Hopefully Austin Dillon can have a good run in this car. The next paint scheme we're taking a look at is Ryan Preece's 2022 Hunt Brothers Pizza Patriotic scheme that we're seeing in the Cup Series race at Charlotte Motor Speedway for the Coke 600. I love this paint scheme. This looks really awesome. Colors look very well. You've got the red, white, and blue on it. There's really not much other than to say to that. I think it does look really good in my opinion. The next paint scheme we're taking a look at is Justin Allgaier's 2022 helmet scheme that we're going to see later this season. I love this scheme. Not much other than that, but I love this scheme. Everything works well. The colors match perfectly. I love it a lot. I'm excited to see on the racetrack here in 2022. The next paint scheme we're taking a look at is Austin Center's 2022 Snap-on Maker's Fixer scheme that we're going to see later this season. Overall, the snap-on scheme we've already looked at, but there's some changes to it. I think it actually looks really solid. It looks very similar to Will Power's scheme in the IndyCar series, and I love that scheme a lot as well. I think this one actually works really, really well, and I'm excited to see on the racetrack here later this season. The next paint scheme we're taking a look at is Bubba Wallace's 2022 Moneyline scheme that we're going to see later this season. It's basically the same thing as the throwback paint scheme. We've already knew kind of is more likely going to be the scheme they're going to run anyways, but it looks very similar to the throwback scheme that he ran, which I actually like that paint scheme overall, and I'm excited to see that Moneyline is jumping on to sponsor Bubba Wallace. The next paint scheme we're taking a look at is Jeb Burton's 2022 Per Year Patriotic scheme that we're going to see tomorrow in the NASCAR Xfinity Series. I love this a lot. Everything about it looks really, really good, and I think the patriotism of the scheme looks very, very solid. And the final paint scheme we're taking a look at is Josh Williams' 2022 Ally Thanks for Our Troops scheme that we're going to see tomorrow in the NASCAR Xfinity Series race. Love the patriotism on the car. There's really not much to say about that. I think it looks really, really solid. I think they did a great job on it. I'm excited to see if they are going to put it on the racetrack here this weekend. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're going to talk about the purse money for this upcoming weekend at Charlotte. So, for the Coke 600 race, the Cup Series race, it'll be $8,919,032. This, of course, includes all the charter money that will get paid pretty much all the charter teams, while the open team of Casgrove and the money team are not going to get much money. For the Xfinity Series race, it's going to be $1,284,615. And then for the Truck Series race, it's only going to be $676,097. Honestly, those numbers are really, really short when it comes to it, all things considered. I really thought the purse money was going to be a little more of that for at least the Truck Series and the Xfinity Series, considering we are in the hometown of these teams. But overall, it's not a major surprise that they really are not giving this much money out. It's not a major shock, and it really isn't a major surprise, to be honest with you. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're going to talk about resin compound. As for this weekend at Charlotte, there actually has been some resin compound that has been applied. So, basically it was reported by Bob Pockers that NASCAR put down resin at Charlotte this week. Then they ran the tire dragon over it. And in that report as well that Bob Pockers put out, they're not planning to any more resin compound to the track after the stuff they added. Very glad to hear that, but a lot of people, I think, have been complaining, and honestly, resin compound is much different than PJ1. PJ1 is a company that supplies that kind of stuff, but PJ1 is much different, and PJ1 only works at Bristol. We've seen resin compound work at tracks like Michigan and Nashville. Nashville had a really good show last year, so that resin compound, I think, is stuff they use in Nashville, which worked really, really well. So I'm not really excited to see resin compound on the track, but hey, at least they're not adding any more resin compound after this, so that at least is a major positive. And now we're going into the next story of today's episode, as we're going to talk about Shell. As it was announced yesterday, that Shell has announced an extension with the Penske Corporation for the next 5 years that will go through 2023 to 2028. They will become the official field of IndyCar in Indianapolis Motor Speedway in 2023, replacing Speedway. They also will be the primary sponsor for Joey Logano going into 2023 for 30 races. Now, we'll get into talking about Joey Logano when it comes to this story later, but this is really huge for the company. Shell has been sponsoring Penske for many, many years. I believe they've been sponsored for almost 50 years now, and they've had a major partnership with the Penske Corporation. So it is not a major surprise to me that Shell is upping their price and how much they're willing to spend to really help out. I'm really excited that Shell is continuing to partner up and brand with another company like Team Penske. And they, of course, went over after working for many, many years, after working over with Kevin Harvick and RCR. It's really exciting that Shell is continuing their partnership and brands with the company. I think it's absolutely great, and it's really exciting to see that Shell is continuing their major brandings. And now we're going to jump to the next story of today's episode, as we're going to talk about Worldwide Express. As Worldwide Express has extended their sponsorship with Nice Motorsports and has expanded their sponsorship with Nice Motorsports, and they are going to sponsor Carson Ospar for 8 races this season. The 8 races they're going to sponsor Carson Ospar are Knoxville, Nashville, Pocono, Indianapolis Raceway Park, Richmond, Bristol, Homestead, and Phoenix. Worldwide Express, of course, already sponsored Ross Chastain for 4 or 5 races this year. With how well Ross Chastain has performing, and especially how good Carson Ospar has generally been performing this season, it's no wonder why they are going to sponsor Carson Ospar. They want a driver that's going to be able to bring success to an organization, and it's great to see a Worldwide Express because they're, of course, sponsoring both Daniel Suarez and Ross Chastain. They're an up-and-coming company that's been really working with technology for years, and it's very exciting to see that Worldwide Express is expanding their partnerships with the company. I think it's really, really awesome. And overall, I think it is really, really exciting, to be honest with you. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're going to talk about rain in dirt flaps. Now, Bob Pockrass reported on Wednesday evening that starting at Knoxville later this year for the Truck Series, the Truck Series must have rain in dirt flats behind the rear tires for dirt races and road courses. Now, in the Cup Series currently at the moment, these have already actually been installed, but they had not been installed for the Truck Series yet. But due to an upcoming dirt race for the Truck Series happening in about a month from now, in fact, I believe the Truck Series race at Knoxville is going to be on June 18th, so that's in about 3 weeks from now. They want to have the stuff ready to go for the Truck Series. I think it's great decisions. I think, one, it will help the visibility for the Truck Series, but also I think it will provide good racing. And especially if Truck Series does have rain at tracks like Watkins Glen, at tracks like later this year, like when they go up, I think, to other tracks later this year, I do think it's good that they are deciding to make decisions like this. I think having a decision for the rain and dirt flats to be added, I think is really, really important. And I think it's a great decision NASCAR decided to add that for the season. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're going to talk about Frank Denny. As Frank Denny is going to spot for Ben Rhodes for the rest of the 2022 season. TJ Bell has been spotting for Ben Rhodes, while moving over to Jesse Little's team as Frank Denny moves over to spot for Ben Rhodes. Frank Denny, I believe, currently spots for AJ Allmendinger in the NASCAR Xfinity Series, and also spots for the 18-16 car in the NASCAR Cup Series as well. So he's going to be part of 2 different manufacturers, which I find really interesting, but you do also have the Eddie DeHaan, who I believe sponsors Tyler Ingram in the Truck Series as well. So it's not a major surprise you have spotters that do work with different manufacturers over time. Frank Denny, I think, has done a really good job, especially helping AJ Allmendinger out, and especially of how well Ben Rhodes has been doing. He probably wanted someone that's a little better than TJ Bell. I will say TJ Bell has done a really good job, and I think he'll actually help Jesse Little out. I think it really is a win-win for both groups. You've got TJ Bell going over and helping out Jesse Little in the O2 team. I think a good spotter. Working them, it does well. And you got Ben Rhodes who's picking up a good spotter overall, too. So I'm glad to see that Frank Denny's getting an opportunity to work with Ben Rhodes. I think it's really exciting. Congratulations to Frank Denny on getting the opportunity to work with Ben Rhodes. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Glory to God Racing, as there have been some changes to the entrance for Glory to God Racing for this upcoming weekend. So, of course, Glory to God Racing, for the first time since, I believe, Atlanta Motor Speedway, is entering 2 cars. Brennan Poole originally was in the 47 car. He is going to be actually moving over to the 46 car and taking over for Ryan Huff. Ryan Huff had been on the entrance for the 46 car. He will no longer be in that car. And Tim Veens, who has not made a Truck Series start since 2020 at Texas, is he making his Truck Series season debut this weekend in the 47 truck. Now, no one is going to be going home. Everyone will be able to make the show, so all the trucks will be able to qualify and make it in, so none of these trucks have issues of making it. There's no owner's points situation and concerns. That 47 truck has not raced since really the beginning of the season. Now, Tim Veens, I'm not expecting much from him in the race. I think he'll probably finish in the back. As for Brennan Poole, I think Brennan Poole will be competing for a top 30 finish. We've seen Brennan Poole be very competitive in that car, and I think Brennan Poole will do a very, very solid job. Congratulations to both of them on getting an opportunity to race once again. Brennan Poole has really carried that team this year. Every time he's gotten in that car, it doesn't matter how much experience he's had. He's done absolutely excellent, has done a really, really great job. So I'm excited to see that he's getting back behind the wheel of that car, and I think he'll do, in my honest opinion, I think he'll do really well in the 46. And I think Tim Veens will do all right in the 47, but I expect him to be one of the slowest trucks on the racetrack. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're going to talk about Brandon Jones. As it was officially revealed that Brandon Jones is going to run 4 more races in ARCA with Kyle Busch Motorsports. Of course, I believe tonight or tomorrow night, he'll be racing in the NASCAR, in the ARCA series for Kyle Busch Motorsports in the 81 car and a second ARCA car. He's going to run 4 more races with the team at Iowa, Pocono, Watkins Glen, and Bristol. Now, a lot of people give Brandon Jones a lot of crap for making the decision to jump down there and race in the ARCA Series, but I feel like what Kyle Busch in Motorsports is trying to do is they're trying to bring a driver who has a lot of experience, who actually, by the way, whether you like him or not, he actually has been really competitive in ARCA, and Xfinity's done all right too this year. I think Brandon Jones is a great driver to bring down to the series to kind of see where your team is at. Because let's be honest with ourselves. No disrespect to Drew Dollar, but he has been absolutely horrendous. And I think that will give a guy like Sammy Smith some opportunity to kind of see what Brandon Jones is capable to do. I think Brandon Jones will get at least 1 or 2 wins in that car this year. In fact, I think he could win tomorrow night. I think he's obviously the favorite to win that race. And I think in that 81 car, he will be able to go out there and win the race. I think also some good competition. There's Conor Mosak, we'll talk about later in this episode, because he's going to be driving a very surprising, shocking announcement around him. But I think Brandon Jones being in this series, I think is a great decision overall. And I think he'll honestly do a really solid and a great job in that car this season. And now we're going to move on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about McLaren. As McLaren officially revealed during IndyCar press conference week, basically during the media days yesterday, they basically announced that it will be building a new 97,000 square foot headquarters for their McLaren SP IndyCar team, with construction set to start later this year. This will be taking place in Indiana. The shop is expected to be like their Formula One shop, which is a major shop. McLaren, of course, in F1 team is really kind of helping with this organization, and they're playing a major role into the future of the organization. McLaren's future driver lineup is currently at this moment not set at the moment right now. We know that Pat Ward is more likely going to be back with the team. There's a lot of rumors that it's going to be Rinus VeeKay and Alexander Rossi, who's going to be driving those other two cars for McLaren next year. It's not been confirmed, but it's been rumored that they're going to be the two drivers that are expected to drive for the team next year as they plan to become a three-car organization next year. And McLaren is right now trying to set their stones for the future. Now, this shop more than likely will not be done until 2024, 2025. They won't have the shop done right away. But overall, I think it's great that McLaren is getting ready to have a shop open up. I think having it ready to go, I think makes a ton of sense. And congratulations to McLaren on getting a new shop. I think them having a new shop is important for IndyCar going forward. And now we're going to move on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Roger Penske. Now, Roger Penske, of course, was interviewed during the media days and basically says that he is ready to welcome 300,000 people in his first full-capacity Indy 500 as an owner of the IndyCar Series in Indianapolis Motor Speedway. And that's absolutely true. Remember, Roger Penske basically took over IndyCar and Indianapolis Motor Speedway around 2019. We had a pandemic in 2020, and we didn't have a full capacity crowd in 2020, but in 2021, 2020 we didn't even have a capacity. Last year, we had a pretty big capacity, and this year, we're going to have a full capacity, and the largest crowd we've seen in IndyCar in nearly over half a decade. 2016, we're basically a little under what we were in 2016. We've had the largest crowd since probably 2017. And I think a lot of this, the hype, one, Roger Penske is running the series very well. And IndyCar, of course, does have stars like Jimmie Johnson, Romain Grosjean over, who are bringing a huge audience over into the world of IndyCar. I think Roger really is excited for this, and I think a lot of fans generally are really excited for it too, because you look especially at the success of IndyCar right now, their ratings could definitely be in a much better position at the moment. But I will say it's great to see that Roger is excited, and he's really excited to get this rolling, and I think a lot of fans like myself are really happy for him too, and hopefully we'll see them have a great race here this Sunday, because of course the Indy 500 is this weekend. I'm excited for it for sure. And now we're going to move on to the next story of today's episode, as we're going to talk about F1 and ESPN. Now, we're going to be talking about NASCAR and ESPN as well in just a little bit in the later portion of this episode, but we got to talk about F1 and ESPN and their future contract talks. Now, currently at the moment, ESPN and F1 have a contract that goes through this season, and there's been a lot of negotiations around for 2023. According to Adam Stern, who reported this yesterday, ESPN's recent talks with F1 to renew U.S. media rights has been very positive, per ESPN EVP Burke Magnus. And apparently, according to also in that report, in the bottom half of that report, it was reported that apparently they're talking about bringing someone out, or a reporter out, to follow around and do a piece for Sports Center. ESPN and F1 F1 in the United States has really grown. I do think ESPN is playing a major role in that. F1 is having some of the biggest ratings they've ever had in the United States, and that's why we have 3 races next year happening for the U.S. market. Of course, you have the Miami GP, the U.S. GP in COTA, and then you have the race in Vegas that's going to happen near, I believe, the season finale, or the second or to last race, or the last race of the season for Formula One. I think a lot of fans have been generally excited about how ESPN is. Now, the big question is a lot of people are wondering, are there going to be commercials going in that or not? A lot of people are wondering if there will be commercials. That's a big question now that a lot of people do have, and I will see what happens there. But in my honest opinion, I think ESPN absolutely and F1 have done together really well together, and I think it's exciting that they're really working together to try to have a good product for the fans. And I think Sky Sports, like I said, you've got David Croft, you've got Martin Brundle, I think always do an excellent and a really solid job. And honestly, I really do hope that we get to see them come back and work together. Honestly, I think it's great for the sport if we see those two come back together, and hopefully we'll see some major success, and hopefully we'll see those contracts come through. That will be announced here in the near future. I would expect that those contracts are going to be announced very in the next couple months, and I hope it's a long-term deal with ESPN. I want to see ESPN take the rights back and get Sky Sports to continue during the coverage that they've been doing. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Kyle Busch. Now, Adam Stevens, who's Christabel's crew chief, was being interviewed by the media when the shops were basically opened up. And Adam Stevens says that Kyle Busch's right rear tire issue at the All-Stars appeared to actually be a puncture and not an issue with the tire pressures. Now, there's been a lot of people that have been talking about this, but the left rear wheels of these tires have been the tires that have been really coming apart. And remember, the same tires that we basically tire compound stuff that we basically had at Texas was the same tire we had at Kansas, and pretty much we saw a lot of tire failures. Now, my theory is if it's a tire puncture, it's more than likely that a situation where the debris from the Kyle Larson wreck that happened, they didn't get that cleaned up properly, and that's probably why Kyle Busch actually did have a tire puncture in this race. Again, it is not a surprise that people are talking about this. I know there's been a lot of concerns that maybe one of the big issues is the fact that the tires may have come apart, but I do believe that overall, I do think the issue was it probably was the tire debris and issues right there. So I'm glad at least that they kind of addressed it. They said they weren't really pushing the tire pressures. I know that Christabel, they had issues in the race, but I don't think that was an issue on their part. I think it was maybe just they kind of pushed it too hard on the tire pressures, maybe for Christopher Bell. But for Kyle Busch, it isn't a major surprise. It probably was debris. They said it was a puncture in the tire. It's probably from the Kyle Larson wreck. So that's kind of surprising. I thought it probably would be issues with the tires, but no. Seems like it was an issue with the tire. It wasn't issues with tire compounds. It was more likely an issue with that. So interesting for sure, and kind of interesting that is what the story is around that. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're going to talk about some wheel penalties. Now, NASCAR has made some changes in regards to the wheel penalties, and basically they have revised some rules. So, as Bob Cocker's reported, NASCAR revised a rule to say if an improperly installed wheel falls off in the pit box, it can still be a penalty. I really don't understand that. I'll tell you why I don't understand that. If a wheel falls off in the pit box, the tire is literally not going back on the racetrack. I understand if a wheel comes off and goes down the pit row, like with Denny Hamlin, where they have the drag race coming off the pit row, that makes a ton of sense. But if a team catches it and the wheel doesn't come off, I'm sorry, if the wheel gets literally back on and they're basically able to back it up into the pit box and they don't drive out of the pit box, that's not the most dangerous. Again, it is dangerous if a tire comes off. But here's another thing I will say in regards to these penalties. I think the penalties are too harsh. I think the fact that a driver can be suspended for a crew chief, and a couple pit crew members can be suspended for 4 races, I do think is a little bit harsh on the teams. There's no reason that a team and a crew chief and those guys should be suspended for 4 races, because when you put the backup guys in there, they're not your best teams. You bring your B-tier guys, you don't bring your really good guys in there, and it does cause an issue where it could cause major problems and have more issues when it comes to the tires. So I don't entirely understand why they're changing these rules, and NASCAR, again, needs to understand that their rules and the wheel penalties are a little bit ridiculous, and I do hope they do revise this. And again, it is issues with tires coming apart, no doubt about it. And I understand they don't want the wheels going back off of the track, right? But if they catch them in the pit boxes, they're not really messing with anybody. So I don't understand why they had to revise those penalties and make those decisions. I get what they're, again, I understand what NASCAR is trying to do here. They're not trying to have tires come off and cause issues, but I don't understand why NASCAR decided to go ahead and say, hey, we're now going to start penalizing teams basically quintessentially because of that. I just don't understand entirely why they've made that decision right there. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Mason Philippe. As Mason Philippe is making his NASCAR Xfinity Series debut next weekend at Portland, driving the number 91 for DGM Racing. Mason Philippe, I believe, competes in Trans Ams or competes in the Porsche Carrera Cup. I'm not entirely sure which series he does compete in, but I've heard that name before, and Mason Philippe has competed in IMSA as well in the past and has some decent experience and has a lot of experience on road courses. And again, we're probably going to see a lot of road course specialists driving the NASCAR Xfinity Series races. And I think it's really intriguing they brought Mason Philippe in. It's kind of surprising they don't have the other Mason Massey driving the number 91 car. But hey, Mason Philippe is an interesting choice to bring behind the wheel of the 91 car to really help their road course chances of winning. That's why they're bringing a lot of road course guys in over the last couple of years. And again, it is not a surprise that Mason Philippe is getting an opportunity to race with DGM. What are my expectations for Mason Philippe? Overall, I think Mason Philippe just get experience out there. I think a top 15 would be great for the team, but there's a lot of competition in the Xfinity Series this year, so I think it's going to be tough to even get a top 15 with the team this year, but I think it's a great opportunity for him, and I'm excited to see that Mason Philippe is getting an opportunity to race in the 91 for DGM Racing. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're going to talk about Conor Mosak. As while we think that Conor Mosak is a Chevy driver, Conor Mosak is going to be making his NASCAR Xfinity Series debut at Portland next weekend, driving the number 18 for Joe Gibbs Racing. This is a shock to me because Conor Mosak has been in the Chevy development camp for a very, very long time and is still driving for Chevy, as he's actually driving a 23-4 Brett Holmes Racing later this week. In fact, driving a 23 tomorrow night in the ARC race. So I'm kind of surprised that Conor Mosak is getting in this ride. But honestly, I'm pretty happy to see he is getting an opportunity to drive that car. I think Conor Mosak is a very, very talented driver. He's an up-and-coming star, and he has a lot of road course and Trans Am racing experience. He's been very successful in the Trans Am series and has gone on to win some Trans Am races too, and I think that experience is going to translate. And this car is capable of winning races. Look at all the drivers that have gotten in that car. They've had Ryan Truex in the car. He's been capable of winning races this year. You've had Trevor Bayne in the car, who's back in the 18 car this weekend. He's been contending for victories in that car. John Nemechek, who's also been contending for races in a car. And Bubba Wallace, who's running the Indy road course race later this year, along with being really fast at COTA and getting that experience at COTA before they had some issues in that race. I think that Conor Mosak is going to be an underdog to win. I don't expect him to win the race. I don't think he's going to be a favorite to win because you still have guys like Ty Gibbs and AJ Allmendinger and Andy Lally and, of course, Justin Allgaier, along with other road course guys who are going to be specialists who are going to be in that race. But I do think he'll do very, very solid and very, very well. And congratulations to Conor Mosak on getting an opportunity. I'm shocked he's getting an opportunity at ride, but I think that Conor Mosak is an interesting driver to put into the ride, and I think, honestly, he will do very, very solid. I'm excited to see that he's got an opportunity to race in the NASCAR Xfinity Series. I hope he does really, really well, and I'm glad to see he is getting an interesting opportunity to race in the series. I think it's good that he's got an opportunity to race with Joe Gibbs Racing, and I think he'll be a contender to win the race. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're going to talk about Kyle Busch. Now, a lot of drivers this past week were being interviewed about if they were interested in doing Indy 500 or not. And usually a driver that comes to mind is Kyle Larson when it comes around the Indy 500. Well, there's another driver that has actually had some interest in running the Indy 500, and it's Kyle Busch. Kyle Busch is being interviewed by the media, and Bob Pockrass asked Kyle Busch in the media center about his interest in doing the Indy 500. He says that he actually had a deal done to race in the Indy 500 in 2017, but Joe Gibbs wouldn't approve of it. And he says it's still on his radar, but he has not sold sponsorship to race in the Indianapolis 500. Now, I actually do remember this story very, 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 very well. Kyle Busch actually was supposed to run the Indy 500 about 4 or 5 years ago, and he actually was supposed to drive that 4-car for Team Penske. Because remember, I think Team Penske had 3 cars at the time. Dave was actually supposed to drive a 4th Team Penske car in 2017, but Joe Gibbs at the time denied that. But Joe Gibbs has come around and basically he's basically got approval from Joe Gibbs to do it now, but he hasn't been approved the sponsorship. And it's a major, major commitment for a guy like Kyle Busch. Now, ultimately, Kyle Busch is definitely one of the best drivers in NASCAR. And, of course, his brother has actually been in the Indy 500 in 2014 with Andretti Autosport. And Kurt Busch had a very impressive run where he actually, for that team, ended up finishing 6th. Yes, there was a slingshot in the draft package, but still he ended up finishing in the top 10. For a guy who really did not have a ton of experience in that car, he did extremely well. And I think there's not a lot of drivers in the Cup Series right now that probably can go and run the Indy NASCAR double, which we'll get into talking about a driver who's interested in doing it. I think there's only 2 drivers currently in the field right now that I think are more than likely to do it. The Kyles, Kyle Busch and Kyle Larson. I think Kyle Larson will do it next year. I think he's more likely going to do it next year, but it would have to be announced at some point this year if he's going to do it. And if Kyle Busch is going to do it next year, which he's had interest in doing Indy 500, I think he would actually do pretty well as well. So I think it's actually interesting that Kyle Busch is interested in doing the Indy 500. It's still on his radar to do it. Again, he wants to probably, though, of course, that's probably not the main thing on his focus. He's still trying to figure out if he's even going to be back with Joe Gibbs Racing or not next year, even though it's more than likely he's going to be back. We're still looking on sponsorship for that. But I do find it interesting that Kyle Busch has had an interest in doing the Indy 500. I really hope he does do it because I think it'd be great for the sport if he got an opportunity to race in the Indianapolis 500s. I think Kyle Busch is a capable enough driver to actually do it. And I kind of hope that he does run the Indy 500 in the future. Hope he really does it. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Joey Logano. Now, we've already talked about the whole situation with the contract extension with Shell Pennzoil, but we haven't really talked about Joey Logano's future. And basically, Roger Penske kind of confirmed about his future with Joey Logano because it did not at the time include an extension. Well, Roger Penske, when they announced his Shell Pennzoil contract, he talked to the media at Indianapolis. And he says that Joey Logano right now has a contract through 2023, which we already knew that the contract right now goes through 2023. He says he's in good conversations with Roger. Joey Logano is in good conversations with Roger Penske and Team Penske. An announcement is expected soon for a long-term contract extension with Joey Logano. Now, how long is this contract extension with Joey Logano expected to be? Honestly, I really don't know. But you think about Joey Logano. Joey Logano is only 31 or is only 32 years old. He just turned 32 here about 2 or 3 days ago. And Joey Logano has been a driver. Yes, he has not won as much as he used to back in the day, but Joey Logano is still one of the best drivers currently in NASCAR. And Joey Logano still has probably at least 10 to 12 years left in his racing career where he honestly could be really, really competitive. He can win a Cup Series championship here in the future. He can go on and win another 30 races in his career. The driver, I think, is capable of getting 60 wins. And I think Roger, especially, they want that guy who's also a veteran because you think about the team. Joey Logano is the veteran of the team. Ryan Blaney is about 28 or 29 years old. He's about 3 years younger than Joey Logano. And then Austin Cindric, he's only 23 or 24 years old. And they want that driver more than likely who's going to bring that veteran experience. And Joey Logano is still, like I said, one of the best drivers currently in NASCAR and is already in the talks of being a future Hall of Famer with 28 career victories, Daytona 500 win. He's won a lot of major races in his career, and I think they want to keep Joey Logano in this team. He's been very successful at Team Penske. He's been arguably the second most successful driver, almost really one of the most successful drivers in the history of Team Penske. And I think it would be really foolish if Roger got rid of him after 2023. How long do I think the extension is going to be for Joey Logano? I think it probably will be a 2 to 3 year extension. I think it won't be too long. It won't be like that massive deal he got where like a 4 or 5 year deal. I think he will have a deal that probably will go through 2026 or 2027. So probably at least a 3 or 4 year extension. It'll be around 37 by that point, and I think then he can probably decide where he wants to go. But I think Joey Logano wants to be committed to finish his contract with the team, and I think he wants to continue racing long term with Team Penske. He's been a driver that's been extremely successful, has done a lot for the Cup Series, and since getting that contract extension, he's won a lot of major races with the team, and I think that he will absolutely do a great job with it. So I think he'll get extended. It's unclear how long he'll get extended for, but I think that we will continue to see We'll continue to see Joey Logano continue driving for this team long-term in the long-term future. And now we're going to move on to the next story of today's episode, as we're going to talk about the Dale Jr. down with Denny Hamlin. Now, last night, I sat through and watched the whole Dale Jr. down, and there's a lot of interesting points throughout Dale Jr. down. If you have never watched Dale Jr. down, it's probably one of my favorite, if not my favorite, it's one of my favorite podcasts out there to listen to in the podcast realm. Of course, in the Dirty Mo Media, it's been the most popular podcast from the Dirty Mo Media, which Dale Jr. manages. Now, Dale Jr., but starting off, Dale Jr. talked about the All-Stars before Denny Hamlin came in as a guest. Dale Jr. says he'd love to see the All-Stars at Nashville and Fairgrounds and Norfolk. We talk about that near the end. He does say that Marcus Smith probably wants to move it around, but also says there's a huge commitment with Tax Motors Speedway, so they have to continue racing at that track. And more likely next year they're going to race, but he also says he'd like to have it at Nashville, Fairgrounds, and Norfolk, which I absolutely agree with him on that. I think having it at like a track, and I think Mike Davis also mentioned this too, that he would like to see the All-Stars move to after once the season is over, have it during the championship week, and make it the All-Stars after the season, which I actually would approve of that being that. And also, I think the Clash could also in the future be the All-Stars. Then Denny Hamlin gets on the show, and there's a lot of really interesting quotes from Denny Hamlin inside the show. And Denny Hamlin Dale Jr. talked about Denny Hamlin's comments speaking to Jim France. And Denny Hamlin says the business model needs to change, says they need to redistribute the money that the business model has. So for a lot of people don't know, right now I believe the teams in the TV, they get 65% of the revenue goes to the racetracks, I believe. And I think then 15% goes to NASCAR, and only 20% of the money that they make from this race, they all go back to the teams. Denny Hamlin wants the teams and basically wants to know what's going on with the TV deal as well, and the drivers and the teams to know, which I agree with him on that. And that's why Denny Hamlin isn't expanding. And Denny Hamlin's thinking about the long-term future as well of this organization, which is why 23XI right now is being put on hold, because Denny Hamlin doesn't want to spend as much money on that, because he doesn't want to basically expand until NASCAR changes the business model. Then another point came up, and Denny Hamlin says that NASCAR needs to get rid of the shifting at these tracks that have been like Texas and stuff. And I do agree with Denny Hamlin to fix the short track problem. The shifting was a big issue. Denny Hamlin said the guys could miss a corner and they get a big shift and they just drive off. And that doesn't make any sense. To me, getting rid of shifting at short tracks is a no-brainer. I think getting rid of the rear diffuser too would be actually another good thing they honestly could do to fix the problem. But I agree with him that shifting needs to go away at short tracks. Next thing to talk about when it comes to Texas and fixing the All-Stars is he says that they probably should turn Texas into another Atlanta. They have to reprofile turn 1s and turn 3 to fix the problem. And I agree with Denny Hamlin. Return Texas another Atlanta, I got no problem with that. Let's turn Texas another Atlanta so we can fix this problem in Texas, because Texas probably would get a lot more respect. A lot more people probably enjoy it. They turned it into a big Texas Super Speedway, made a 3-mile track. Or just tore it down and bring the bulldozer out to fix Texas. But you got to stay in that area because it's a huge market. Next thing he talked about is he talked about what the team wants the team to look like, and he talks about that he wants to have a third car at 2311. He says that basically with the profit and stuff they make off the 2 and 3 cars, they said that right now he wants to probably at the moment only have 3 cars in the organization. He said maybe long-term a 4-car team, but he says right now he only wants to have a 3-car team at 2311 Racing, which I find interesting, but they can't at the moment when they don't want to expand the team, so NASCAR changes the business model, because they've got millions and billions of dollars in the company with Jordan Brandon, Curtis Polk, and those people that work there. Next thing they talk about is he says that he would like that if he had the opportunity, he would drive for his own team, but he does mention that he wants to finish his career with Joe Gibbs Racing if FedEx continues to stay on. So that's an interesting case, is that if FedEx continues their contract, if they get a contract extension, because I believe Denny Hamlin has a contract that goes through 2023 at the moment, he basically mentions and says that basically said he would go to his own team if FedEx does not stay, but he wants to retire with Joe Gibbs Racing, which that's pretty cool that he wants to retire with Joe Gibbs Racing, and maybe in the future could do 1 off or 2 races with 2311 Racing and be a teammate, of course, with Bubba Wallace and even Kurt Busch, if Kurt Busch even sticks around for that long, because we know that Kurt's going to be back with 2311 next year, but after 2023, we don't even know the future of that. Then they talk about Martin Truex Jr.'s contract is uncertain is about Martin Truex Jr. Really, no one's talked about this too much. But Martin Truex Jr.'s future is currently uncertain at the moment, and basically said Martin Truex Jr. is really unsure if he's going to be back next year with Joe Gibbs Racing, which, again, I've not seen any major media people really questioning too much about this, and not anybody that I know has been really talking about this, but Martin Truex Jr. has really been questioning his future. It's unclear if he'll be back next year, but it won't be Ty Gibbs getting the ride, because Ty Gibbs is going to be back in Xfinity, so we follow that story very closely. Then Denny Hamlin talked about how to fix the All-Stars, and really we talked already about it, but he talked about it. And then Dillon Jr. basically talked about the Cup Series and basically said they've talked, that Junior Motorsports has talked about the Cup Series, and they said it's just a cost right now. And basically he said that the costs are really, really high at the moment right now, and really it's just going to be the cost of everything. Because the charters, they're rumored to be $15 million. That's what they're saying. The items we're talking about is about a month ago, that basically it's going to be like $1 million, $15 million per charter coming up. Despite what a lot of people are saying that the charter money is going to go down, they're expecting that the prices are going to go up. I think the podcast, if you have not gone and listened to the podcast yet, I suggest you go and listen to it. It's a really good, it's probably one of my favorite podcasts that Dale Jr. Dowell has ever had. Go listen to it. It's a really good podcast. There's a lot more points that I haven't mentioned in this, but I just wanted to mention all the major points from the Dale Jr. Dowell. I definitely suggest going out and checking the Dale Jr. Dowell. I think you're going to really love it. I think you don't want to miss what the Dale Jr. Dowell has to say. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're going to talk about ESPN and NASCAR. Now, we've talked about NASCAR and their TV deal that's coming up here in the future. Burke Mattis, who basically is the executive for ESPN, he basically confirmed that ESPN will be talking with NASCAR about their next team media rights deal if the time is right. But it's happening with F1 as the flagship racing property for now. Now, we've talked about this in the past, about the upcoming TV deal that's coming up in the near future. Remember, NASCAR currently has a TV deal that started back in 2015 and currently is going through 2024. A lot of industry insiders who work in the TV side of things, they're talking and basically saying that right now ESPN is one of the front runners that could potentially take over. The thing is, though, is that Formula One has made a lot of money for ESPN. And one of the things that, unlike Formula One, which they're trying to see if they can keep commercials out of the broadcast or not, ESPN for NASCAR, they will more likely have commercials in their TV broadcast. And a lot of rumors indicate that the two networks right now that potentially could be the networks to take over are Fox and ESPN. Now, personally, if I had to choose which two networks I'd like to see go into the world of NASCAR, NBC, ESPN. No disrespect to Fox. There's things that Fox have done recently. I think they've done a lot better job recently. They started off the season and recently. But I really don't want to see Fox back. NBC and ESPN would be a no-brainer. have NBC start the season where basically NBC has a Daytona 500, especially with the winter limits if they do get that. That would be huge for NBC, and we'd have a huge race for NASCAR right there. And I think when it comes to ESPN's future in NASCAR, they have not been in NASCAR since 2014. They left NASCAR, and honestly, NASCAR really left them after 2000, and they really didn't care. And a lot of the people that used to work with them kind of went over to NBC and went over to Fox. Now, ultimately, if ESPN does come back and they do become a brand that does come back in the future, who would I like to see on the broadcast for them? So if NBC does leave, I want to see the three guys I want to see. Alan Bestwick leading the commentaries. Alan Bestwick done a great job. Dale Jarrett, I'd like to actually see being there because Dale Jarrett provides a lot of great analysts. He's done a great job when he's in the booth. I'm really shocked he's not in the booth with NBC. I don't know why he's in the race day kind of stuff. He should be in the booth regardless. I don't understand why he's not in the booth. And I do think that Dale Jr. would be my other guy to go with. But if it's Fox that loses the contract and NBC and ESPN come in, you still bring Alan Bestwick in there. You do, however, bring Jay McMurray into the booth. Jay McMurray I think, is one of the best commentators in NASCAR. In fact, one of the most underrated commentators in the booth. He's done an excellent and a solid job in the booth. And I think he would be a great person to bring into the booth for ESPN. Bring a lot of analytical stuff. He's done a great job with Fox. And that's why he's being brought back for the Coke 600 this weekend, because everyone really wants it back. Even a lot of executives and even people in the industry, a lot of reporters were talking how Jay McMurray does a great job. But back to these contract talks and stuff around ESPN and NASCAR, these TV deals are going to heat up. And the reason we're talking about this so much is because we're not too far from these negotiations starting. Whether you like it or not, the fact they're already hearing about this is very interesting because they're expected to start heating up as early as next year. And more than likely, we're going to hear a deal, what the deal is going to be in 2024, by 2023. Or more likely, we're going to start hearing more about this as we get closer. I do hope ESPN does become one of the favorite runners. I actually like to see ESPN back in. But if ESPN really wants to come back in, they better start taking the broadcast seriously. They better start doing their Sports Center stuff better. But I think motorsports needs to have a big presence on ESPN. We've seen how well Formula One's been doing with their media presence. And honestly, I think ESPN would be an amazing network to get the racing. So hopefully that does happen. It'd be great for the sport. And maybe we'll see ESPN get back on NASCAR's coverage. But we're overall going to have to wait and see what happens going forward. And now we're going to jump on to the first of two major stories of today's episode, as we're going to talk about Jimmie Johnson. Now, Jimmie Johnson was being interviewed by the media this past week during the media days and was talking about, and he was basically asked about his interest in maybe doing the Indy NASCAR double. Well, he actually responded to the media and basically said that he actually is interested in doing the Indy Charlotte double. But he would have to say that he would have to be in a really competitive car to be able to do that. Jimmie Johnson, well, of course, he's competing in his first Indianapolis 500. He also is arguably the greatest NASCAR driver of all time, a 7-time NASCAR Cup Series champion. A lot of people brought up and one thing I would really love seeing, I've been wanting to see Jimmie Johnson come back and run. This would be the perfect opportunity. Now, of course, people bring up the logistics side of things. When the race gets done, he would have to basically fly out, more likely fly out there from the beginning of the race. But I think Jimmie Johnson, if there's anybody that would be really, really capable of doing that, flying out from Indianapolis out to the Charlotte area, I think Jimmie Johnson would be capable of doing that. Now, of course, when it comes to Jimmie Johnson, you have to ask yourself, what team would Jimmie Johnson go to? A lot of people mentioned the Trackhouse 91 Project 91 car, which we're going to be talking about that here at the end of this episode. I don't see that being the car that Jimmie Johnson would run it. And the reason that I wouldn't see, unless they do open up a fourth car at Trackhouse, that Project 91 car is not going to be meant for American drivers. That car is meant for international drivers from the European side of things and the Formula One side of things. They don't want to bring someone like Jimmie Johnson. That's no disrespect, because I think Trackhouse would be a great team for Jimmie Johnson to go over. So I think that'd be a great team. There's other options available. It won't be Hendrick Motorsports, though, because Hendrick Motorsports has 4 cars. And the situation with the charters right now is that no team, even open teams, you can't have more than 4 cars, even if it's a part-time entry. You can't have more than 4 cars. It's a stupid rule. That rule actually needs to go away. And I think having an open fifth part-time car for up-and-coming drivers is something that definitely does need to happen. But the thing is, too, is that Jimmie Johnson, I think, would be willing to do it. And you got other drivers that are interested. Kyle Larson, Kyle Busch, who are interested in doing the double. And the last time someone did the double, or attempted the double, was Kurt Busch in 2014. Jimmie Johnson, I think, be capable. And, of course, there's other teams that are available, too. You've got Rich Choice Racing could be a team that'd be available. I know they have an alliance with Hendrick Motorsports currently at the moment. That'd be a great team to go to a third car. Spire Motorsports, I think Spire would be a great opportunity, that second car, and have Hendrick really put all the resources in the basket of that second car to get Jimmie Johnson a competitive ride. But I love that Jimmie Johnson has shown interest in wanting to do the Indy NASCAR double. And honestly, it could happen this year. Not this year, but it could happen next year. I think it would be awesome if he got the opportunity to do the Indy NASCAR double. I think it would be amazing if he got the opportunity. And honestly, I really hope he ends up doing this. I think it would be amazing for the sport if Jimmie Johnson could come back to the world of NASCAR. I also think a lot of the Jimmie Johnson fans who have left the sport would return to NASCAR and come back and try out NASCAR and be fans once again of our sport. So I really do hope and pray that it does end up happening where Jimmie Johnson does decide to come back to the world of NASCAR and does the Indy NASCAR double. I think it would be awesome if we can get Jimmie Johnson back into NASCAR. I think it'd be great. He has said it. He's been at points interested in wanting to come back to NASCAR. He's over the last year or so has been interested, but he also does at the same time, he wants to really overall focus on trying to be competitive in IndyCar. I mean, he hasn't done great at road courses, but he's been really good at ovals. And again, he has a really good shot to win the Indy 500 this weekend. In fact, in about 3 days, the Indy 500 is going to happen. He's been very competitive on the ovals. In fact, a little nervous so that he could I think he's probably a little nervous, and I'm a little worried about his chance to win an Indy 500, but I think he's got a shot at it. But I'm worried that he may end up going over the line and wrecking the car because he's pushing it too much to try to win the biggest race for IndyCar, the Indy 500. So I hope that Jimmie Johnson does the Indy NASCAR double. I think he's got a shot at doing it, but again, it would have to be with a competitive team, and hopefully Jimmie Johnson at the future does Indy NASCAR double in the near future. We're going to jump on to the final major story of today's episode, as we're going to talk about the Trackhouse Project 91 major announcements. So, we talked about this already, that Trackhouse was expected to make a major announcement this week on who the driver is going to be. The driver who's going to be driving the Trackhouse Project number 91 car is going to be former Formula One world champion who won the 2007 F1 championship by 1 point over Lewis Hamilton, Kimi Raikkonen. Kimi Raikkonen will be driving the number 91 for Trackhouse Racing in the Project 91 car at Watkins Glen later this year. This is going to be the only start that Kimi Raikkonen is going to have this season, with in 2023 the plan for him in 2023 to run more races, the car to run more races with more different drivers. This is absolutely a massive story for many reasons. Kimi Raikkonen is one of the most successful Formula One drivers of all time, and he's a driver who has actually had a little bit of NASCAR experience in the past. Kimi Raikkonen in 2011 actually competed in the NASCAR Xfinity Series and the NASCAR Camping World Truck Series. In 2011, in the Truck Series, drove the 15 for KBM, which I think with assistance from Billy Baloo Motorsports, and I believe finished in the top 15, I think in 12th position, which is not bad for a guy who does have a lot of stock car experience. Then the Xfinity Series drove the 87 for Kyle Busch Motorsports with assistance from Joe Nemechek's Nemco Motorsports, where I believe finished in the top 25 or 30, had some fueling problems in that race, and had a decent success. And he's had thoughts in the past of maybe coming back to NASCAR. Now, Kimi Raikkonen, of course, at the time, said he didn't want to come back to racing, but Justin Marks approached him when he was in Switzerland. He was in Europe a couple weeks ago, and Kimi said, you know what? I'm really going to get to love this opportunity. This is a huge for many reasons. One, this story has gotten a lot of international attention. Not only have you had NASCAR reporters talking about this, but Formula One and even Formula One reporters are talking about this story as well. And this will grow a huge international presence. And I will probably telling you this, we're probably going to have one of the largest audiences for a race at Watkins Glen because of how huge Kimi Raikkonen is to the international scene. And having him in the world of NASCAR again is absolutely huge. If you would have told me coming in the season that not only Kimi Raikkonen be racing in NASCAR, but Boris Said be back, Greg Biffle will be back, and Jacques Villeneuve will be back in NASCAR, it's just crazy to think that all these people will be back in the world of racing. Kimi Raikkonen coming over to NASCAR is just incredible and just a huge story for the sport. The guy's a legend in the world of racing. You have so much respect around this guy, and I think he will be somewhat competitive. And look at what Trackhouse Racing is and how much they've accomplished. Trackhouse Racing is definitely one of the most interesting teams. You've got Daniel Suarez and Ross Chastain, your drivers. You've got Justin Marks and Pitbull co-owning the team. You've got a Ty Norris being your general manager of your organization. And you've got Darian Grubb, who's actually going to be the crew chief for Kimi Raikkonen in this car. Darian Grubb, of course, who is a championship-winning crew chief, which Tony Stewart won races with Denny Hamlin, won with Carl Edwards, and he was with Casey Kane. Really didn't do great near the end of that time. But Darian Grubb's done really well with Trackhouse Racing. You've got a great organization overall and a team that's really building toward the future. And like I said, they're the most interesting team currently in the world of NASCAR at this moment. And at the same time as well, there were rumors like a year or two ago that they were literally interested in jumping up to other forms of racing. They were talking about going over to the world of freaking IndyCar, running the Indianapolis 500 this year. I mean, what Justin Marks' vision and Justin Marks and his team just made such an incredible organization. And Trackhouse has become a team that's been very successful. And what they focus on, they don't focus like 2311, unlike 2311, they don't focus basically on trying to put like product and stuff out. They try to put out there and show what they can do behind the wheel of a race car. And that's what has made them so successful as an organization over these years. And I think that we'll see Kimi Raikkonen be somewhat competitive. Now, my expectations for Kimi Raikkonen in this car, I think Kimi will be somewhat competitive. I don't think he's going to win, because Kimi Raikkonen has had a lot of experience. He's probably going to get some testing done. I would think NASCAR will probably let Kimi Raikkonen have some testing done. Again, he's a world champion. They'll probably let him have a little bit of testing done. Probably if Trackhouse does have a road course test, I mean, they probably should have had him in Watkins Glen, but they do have a test with them. They'll probably let him test one of those cars at an upcoming test session. But I will also say this. He's going to have to compete against a lot of good guys like Kyle Larson. He's going to have to go up against guys like Chase Elliott and Ross Chastain, his teammate, and Daniel Suarez. Mark Truex Jr., Kyle Busch, Denny Hamlin. He's going to have to be a lot of good road course races like Austin Cindric as well, and AJ Allmendinger and other guys who are really, really good at road courses he's going to have to beat. But I think Kimi Raikkonen is up for the challenge, and he wouldn't have taken the challenge if he really didn't want to come and do this. And just having the presence of Kimi Raikkonen in the sport of NASCAR is just major, major alone, and just the presence it's gotten and the national attention that this story has gotten is huge. And again, I'm so excited that Kimi Raikkonen is actually coming into racing again. Just for him to come back to the world of racing, come back to NASCAR is amazing for the sport, and I'm really excited to see that he's coming over. And I think the Project 91 car, the future of that car, is really great. I think you're going to see some other guys. I think they're trying to get guys from Formula 1. I think Julio Castroneves, if you're going to get someone outside of Formula 1, bring Julio Castroneves in next year. Bring him in there. I know that Julio's shown interest, and I think he'd be a great driver to bring in there too next year. Even Juan Montoya, who is a former Formula 1 champion, he'd be a great driver to have. But I'm excited to see that Kimi Raikkonen is actually getting a massive and incredible opportunity to race in NASCAR. So, anyway, that's today's on NASCAR and motorsports video. I want to thank you guys for watching. Please subscribe to the channel, notifications to be notified when a video does go live on my channel. Follow me on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram, and put some more me on pages on list schedule below that, and comment your thoughts on today's video. What are your thoughts about Kimi Raikkonen racing in NASCAR once again, and do you think he'll do well with Trackhouse or not? Let me know in the comments below. And what are your thoughts about all the other stories we discussed here today on the channel? Let me know in the comments below. Later tonight, we're going to have the NASCAR Truck Series race. We'll be talking about the Truck Series race view. And next week, I'm going to be on another person's channel. I'm going to be on an upcoming, basically a reporter who's been on the upward rise. You'll be hearing more about that next week. I'm planning to be on there at some point, maybe Tuesday or Wednesday. I'll give the guy a notification when we'll do that, and he'll be on there as well. I'm not sure what's coming out tomorrow on the channel. I probably more likely will have the Coke 600 starting grid for you guys out tomorrow. I haven't done one of those since I think Phoenix, if I'm not mistaken, or the 6th or 7th race of the year. So I will be having a starting grid for the Coke 600 drop on Saturday evening. You'll be seeing that on the channel. So anyway, like I said, thank you guys for watching today's video, and I'll see you guys next time for some more great, awesome NASCAR and other motorsports content on the channel like this. Take care, everybody.